For centuries, this ancient tower has been falling, slowly and silently. Little by little, every single year, it tilts a fraction further. The world watched with fascination, waiting for the day it would collapse. Because this is not just the story of a crooked building. It is the story of a catastrophic mistake that became one of history's greatest. A proud and ambitious city that desperately wanted to reach the sky, but found the real problem was not the sky. Today you see it there, elegant, impossibly white, almost weightless in the light. But this form was never planned by any architect or engineer. It was not born this way, it became this way through centuries of. In the beginning, the city of Pisa carried a name of immense and extraordinary. A vibrant port city filled with merchant ships, exotic trade goods, and enormous wealth. But above all else, Pisa was fiercely and completely defined by civic pride. Medieval Italian cities competed aggressively, not just in coins and weapons of war. They competed with breathtaking ferocity by building upward in stone and marble. In grand cathedrals, magnificent central squares, and towers piercing the Italian sky. Because a building was never simply a building or a structure of mere convenience. It was a direct and permanent challenge thrown defiantly at the face of time. Here, on this sacred square, Pisa decided to add one final great element. A towering, majestic bell tower visible for miles across the flat Tuscan countryside. A functional structure designed to complete and crown the entire religious complex. But back then, this place looked nothing like what we visit and photograph today. It was not the neat, manicured garden of green grass we know from postcards. It was a vast, sacred, and chaotic space alive with brutal construction activity. The massive cathedral beside it was already standing, glowing with religious authority. The circular baptistry was just beginning to slowly rise from the muddy ground nearby. And now another massive construction site was steadily expanding in this crowded square. Workers surrounded by compacted earth, piles of raw materials, and wooden scaffolding. Heavy wheelbarrows, enormous white stone blocks, and utterly exhausted laborers everywhere. As far from the peaceful tranquility of any tourist postcard as possible. A relentless place echoing with sharp hammers, shouting voices, and thick choking dust. Right here, the proud city of Pisa decided to erect its most ambitious monument. Built not just for beauty or function, but for the raw expression of. And so, in the year 1173, the very first foundation stone was laid. The tower was designed for one purpose, to be the cathedral's resonant bell. Not an ornament, but the true living voice of the entire city. Calling citizens to prayer, warning them of danger, rejoicing on days of celebration. A massive presence designed to completely dominate the entire open square around it. But the problem is that sometimes the earth itself forces a brutal compromise. The ground beneath the chosen site was dangerously soft, unstable, and incredibly deceptive. Put a giant structure on a fatally weak foundation, and nature, without mercy, simply presents the final devastating engineering bill. Most disturbingly, the tower did not even wait to be finished before leaning. The terrifying tilt began almost immediately during the very first years of construction. Imagine the scene: the massive white marble blocks are being hauled upward tier. The heavy walls grow slowly but steadily higher into the warm Tuscan sky. And then, suddenly, someone notices that one critical line is no longer perfectly straight. A deeply unsettling feeling that one entire side is sitting measurably and visibly lower. You desperately try to convince yourself it is nothing but a strange. You tell yourself it must be just a trick of the afternoon. But the illusion does not pass with the next morning. Here lies the very first great and agonizing architectural paradox of Pisa. The higher the tower rose with each new tier, and the more dangerous, the more absolutely crucial it was to. To abandon it entirely meant admitting catastrophic and humiliating public failure to. What do you do when the great dream you have committed everything? Do you abandon it entirely, or push forward blindly and hope for? Pisa chose to continue building, but now with immense fear and pushing through structural attempts, endless recalculations, and agonizing corrections to the rising. The construction would stretch slowly across multiple entire generations of dedicated builders. You begin a project fully knowing you may never live to see. It is an almost tragic and haunting thought. You lay one stone today, adding your anonymous contribution to an uncertain, knowing your name will never be carved anywhere on the final finished. You are simply one exhausted hand among many thousands spread across the. Meanwhile, all of normal life outside the dusty construction site continues undisturbed. Politics shift and change, powerful leaders rise and fall. Brutal wars, dangerous political tensions, and severe economic crises strike without warning. Every enforced long pause in construction was a sharp and terrifying double-edged. Stopping entirely could either accidentally save the tower, but while human work pauses and politics argue, the tower is left standing, incomplete, alone. When construction restarts in 1272, the builders cannot pretend nothing has happened. They are forced to come fully to terms with the dangerous, and so they do something truly astonishing, something no builder had ever. They try to actively correct the direction of the structure while continuing, trying desperately to restore some measure of balance to the already severely. Building upward on a leaning tower is like walking straight on like attempting to build a fragile house of cards during a howling. One single miscalculation on this structure, and everything built over centuries. Yet, despite the impossible odds, the leaning white tower stubbornly continues. Slowly, painfully, driven upward by nothing but relentless and extraordinary human. Finally, after almost 2 full centuries of construction, war, plague, in the year 1372, after nearly 200 years of effort, when finished, it was not perfect, already leaning at a terrifying, but it was at last whole, crowned with its beautiful belfry, the white stone arches of the highest tier still looking almost fresh. Instead of a monument to failure, it somehow feels, because against every conceivable law of structural engineering. But the deep and relentless pull of gravity never once stops working. Every single passing year, the enormous weight of marble continues pressing in. The further it leans outward, the more extreme the structural pressure. For long and quiet centuries, the tower simply remains frozen in its, standing against all reason, but carrying within its marble bones immense. It becomes famous across the globe precisely because it always looks about. But generation after generation, it stubbornly and defiantly continues to resist, until, in the modern age, the lean finally becomes too extreme for, no longer merely a romantic curiosity, and so humanity decides to attempt what had never been done before. We are not speaking about something distant. In the year 1990, the Leaning Tower of Pisa was officially closed, because the very real risk of catastrophic collapse was no longer merely a real, urgent, and desperately serious modern engineering campaign was launched in a decade-long battle of careful intervention stretching all the way through to a slow and almost surgical campaign to stabilize the tower without. Because to save this tower is a deeply complex and philosophically troubling. You cannot save it simply by straightening it into a conventional, and straightening it would kill the single quality that makes it absolutely unique. But doing absolutely nothing means risking losing it entirely and forever too. The only path is to cure it, carefully and gently. A deeply technical modern struggle begins unfolding around the ancient and irreplaceable. Nervous engineers arrive with the most sophisticated high-tech instruments ever aimed at. Day and night, sensitive sensors measure every single fraction of every millimeter, monitoring the stone continuously, the way a hospital monitors it critically, tracking every controlled crack, every fluctuation in the lean. Because what is happening here is not a conventional restoration of it is an attempt to permanently halt a slow and centuries-old geological. The scene around this ancient monument becomes truly and completely absurd, and you are not simply supporting a building. Engineers develop many different, bold, and sometimes extraordinarily daring technical approaches. Some solutions are genuinely brilliant in their elegance. Others are potentially catastrophic. In some early interventions, heavy lead counterweights are added directly to the raised base, the team hoping to use raw physical mass to pull the leaning top back. In other approaches, engineers work directly and delicately with the soil beneath the foundation, carefully removing tiny, precise, measured volumes of soil from the high side of the millimeter by millimeter, forcing the earth to rebalance gently without any sudden violence. There are also interventions attempted during this decade that are frightening even to recall. Overly aggressive interventions that actually increase the immediate risk of total catastrophic collapse. With a structure as uniquely stressed as this one, while the experts wage their invisible war inside the fences, tourists arrive in enormous crowds, taking photographs, laughing loudly, enjoying the Italian sunshine, all performing that one universal gesture, a single hand raised. An almost comical scene. Cheerful crowds gathered around a monument in genuine mortal. Millions of smiling visitors pretending to save this ancient tower with the power of. But behind this innocent and joyful game, there is a far deeper truth quietly. This tower was saved, not by any single hand. Here, history makes one of its strangest interventions into the story of human ambition. The Leaning Tower became the most recognized tower on Earth. We live in a world that demands everything appear polished, flawless, and relentlessly perfect, where if something starts wrong, the instinct is always to hide it. Yet Pisa became eternal precisely and only because it refused absolutely to hide it. It faced the flaw directly, rose above it to the very top. And now, hanging suspended in its impossible angle above the green grass. You do not need to be perfect to become eternal.